All right, so welcome to the last part of the Hack Mobile series. If you're here, congrats, you made it to the end. This workshop's going to be kind of long. We'll be going over Firebase stuff involving databases and what else? User authentication. So yeah, the slides are here and the repo is here. So if you want to follow along, the repo here, the master branch contains the code from last workshop that we worked on. And you can see like where we left off on each workshop in the different branches. Okay, and then, yeah, the checking code is mobile nation, all lowercase, one word. So if you want your points, check in at members.acmucsd.com. I'm actually going to do that right now because I always forget, in case anyone needs a demonstration. There we go. Checked into my own event. All right. Endgame came out a year ago. I don't know what you're talking about. Spoilers. Anyway, in case you missed it, so here's a quick summary of the last workshop. Okay. So we went over, so this was the advanced sort of Flutter workshop. And we went over navigation, first of all. And there's two different approaches, declarative and imperative. And we focused on imperative because that was just way easier. So declarative is the new way of doing things. And there's this article here that you can read if you want to learn more. It was kind of complicated. To be honest, I did not really understand it. But yeah, it's there if you want to dive into it. But basically, imperative navigation was we treat the navigator as a stack of screens. And we push and pop depending on if we want to go forward or back to the next screen. And then we looked at text field controllers. So the text field state is handled by a controller here. And this essentially keeps track of what text is in here. And we use this to create new tasks. To like be able to create our new tasks with our own titles and stuff. And then lastly, we looked at gestures. We also looked at this dismissible widgets. That was also another type of gesture. But this one is pretty simple in that it just allows you to handle like tapping and swiping, long pressing things. So yeah. And our progress so far, we ended up with a basic to-do list app that allows us to create, delete, and edit tasks. But there's one key flaw, right? Data does not persist because it's stored purely in application state. And if you want the code for that, it's right here in this link. So here, this is the demo I have of just what we have so far. Did anything break? I don't know. Okay. So we can create new tasks. Drop all classes. I hate school. This is an example. So we can create tasks. I'm not going to spend time thinking of a thing. All right, we can edit them. Right, and it updates. We can delete them like this. So this is like pretty much there in terms of functionality. But if we go over and delete this, right, and we run this again, the state's going to completely change, right? Because the data is just completely lost. I'm not even going to wait for this to run. So we're going to be looking at ways to sort of deal with that and also introducing other features that we can implement. So first of all, Firebase. What is Firebase and how much does it weigh? No, okay. So Firebase is, it's a cloud computing service managed by Google. I think they used to be by themselves, but Google like bought them a few years ago. And the idea is that we're managing backend infrastructure. They do it for you, so you don't have to. And they include services like database, authentication, serverless computing, etc. Like, because if you ever coded a backend by yourself, right, you have to think about how to handle like everything, basically, right? Authentication, managing your own database, right? Trying to deploy and scale the whole thing. But Firebase kind of does it for you, obviously at a cost. You're paying for that essentially, but it just makes things a lot easier, so you can concentrate on your front end, for example. So here's just some of the different features of Firebase. We're not obviously going to be going over all of these. We'll just be looking at Auth and Cloud Firestore, but here's just like a general like overview of what it is. Sad backend engineer noises. I think Firebase is sort of like an alternative solution. Most larger companies obviously manage their own backends because they want to tailor them to their own needs, right? So Firebase is, I think, very convenient if you're just starting out, but a lot of people, as you scale up, it might start costing more and more. So yeah, your jobs are secure, don't worry. Anyway, so today's agenda, we'll be focusing on setting up, so just how to add Firebase to your app, Cloud Firestore for databases, and then we'll get into user authentication, and then finally we'll be demoing our app. So a quick thing about this, I wanted to actually include cloud messaging, which is the push notification system, but this workshop was kind of rushed, so unfortunately did not have the time. But if you ever have questions about that, feel free to like ping me on Discord or something. Anyway, so setting up a Firebase project. So you're going to start with going to firebase.google.com and logging with your Google account. So I'm just going to do that like real quick, just to kind of demonstrate. I think I might be out of my quota for Firebase, but basically click add project, and you can just type in your project name here and just follow the instructions that you go through. I actually reached the project limit for this account, so I unfortunately cannot demo that, but it should be pretty easy to, they'll walk you through the steps. Anyway, back to this. So for Android, so this is, unfortunately, Firebase is one of the weird things where you have to go into each, individual app code and change stuff in that folder. So for Android, we're going to need to set something up. So in the Firebase project overview, we're going to add an app and then copy the SHA, the SHA-1 key. I think that's how it's pronounced. And then get the JSON files. That's what we'll need. So I'll just demonstrate that really quick. So that's under project overview. Then we're going to add an Android app here. So your package name is pretty much whatever you want it to be. It's like a reverse domain, basically. I'll just say and then the rest of this is optional. But here, if you want to use Google like sign-in, you'll need this later. So we'll just do this now. So if you don't know how to get this, it's very simple. Just go into the Android directory. And we're just going to run /Gradle w signing report. And it'll take a sec, and it'll generate the necessary things you'll need. Yeah, so if you scroll through here, you're going to want the debug Android test. And you're going to copy this key here. case, I think I already have it. Yeah. Oh, okay, whatever. So after this, you just follow the directions, and then just download the JSON file and place it in the Android app directory. And that's in here. So you'll get this Google Services JSON that looks something like this. And you don't actually want to commit this to GitHub because this is all like private key information. I guess I'm recording this and uploading this to YouTube so the whole world can see anyway. But like, you know, if you're doing this, you don't want to commit this to GitHub because like if there's like bots or whatever scraping GitHub for like private keys, if they somehow take this, right, they can like spam your Firebase and cost you like millions of dollars. I'm just gonna close this, and I'll probably just delete the project later. Anyway, so yeah. So this is just an example of what it looks like. We're also going to have to modify the build Gradle files. So this is kind of annoying. Basically, so inside of the root build Gradle, we're going to have to add Google Play Services as a dependency. So I'm just going to copy that from somewhere. So I don't want to type all this out. So you notice in Android, there's two different build Gradles. There's one inside the app and one inside the root, which is here. So you're going to go into here and add it under here. Save that. And then inside the app build Gradle, you're going to change the application ID to match Firebase and then add it as a dependency. So that's done in here. So this is the app level build Gradle. A little confusing. So we set it up as com.garrettlou.hackmobile. So just change it to whatever you set your app up as in the Firebase console. Then we're going to also need to add multi-dex. How do you spell? I didn't include this in the slides, but apparently you need to add multi-dexing or else it'll just break. Not exactly sure why. So multi. And then in the dependencies, you're going to add the Firebase as the actual dependency. So pretty simple enough. iOS setup. So I actually didn't do this because I don't have an Apple developer account, and apparently you need one of those. So yeah, if you have any questions, like I'll try to answer them about this process, but know that I didn't actually go through this and make sure everything worked. But you can actually like open the iOS project in Xcode and add in your Google Services file that way. Yeah, so for this workshop, we'll be using Android instead. But if you're using iOS, I'll still try my best to help you. Anyway, so Cloud Firestore, we'll be going over some database concepts. These slides are stolen directly from the Hack School database workshop, but I made that workshop, so I'm just plagiarizing from myself. Anyway, so a database is an organized collection of data or information. Right, sounds simple enough. So why do we need a database? Well, I mentioned this before. We need to store and persist information, right? We can do this with local storage, but doing it with a database essentially keeps our data synced between every device. So if you get a new phone or something, or you go on your computer and you try to access that data, you can still access it. But it also serves the task of organizing our data in a logical way. So in the case of our app, we're using this to store information about tasks that a user has created. And there's two types of databases. Well, there's many types, but like this is the two main types that you'll see are SQL and NoSQL. So SQL is relational, and they basically use tables to organize information. NoSQL is non-relational, and they typically organize in documents. But it doesn't have to be documents, right? It could technically be anything. So in Cloud Firestore, data is stored in collections of documents which contain key value pairs. And this is very similar to how MongoDB does it as well. And so this is just a picture of what the database looks like. You have collections, which are made up of documents, and the collections all together make up a database. So a database has one or more collections, basically. So anyway, we're going to start with initializing Firestore. So we need to, first of all, import this. So think of pubspec.yaml as like package.json if you're used to web development and NPM. It's what manages all your dependencies for your project. So in here, we're going to add that here. So we need to add Firebase Core and Cloud Firestore for this. So you just insert that here. I'm just going to copy it from somewhere else because I don't want to type it out. There we go. Such good software developers. So normally you have to run Flutter pub get, but VS Code does it for you, which is very nice. And now you put this into your Dart code to be able to initialize it. We'll write this part later because we're going to be writing a custom class to handle data operations. Yeah, and we just do this so we don't have to call Firebase Firestore.instance every time. I don't want to type this out, right? So now we'll get into CRUD operations. So this is what most, these are like the 4 basic operations of like a lot of databases, where you can create, read, update, and delete data. Right, and this pretty much encompasses like everything you need to do with a database. So creating documents with Firestore is pretty simple. You just use the .add. So you specify which collection you want to add it to, and then use .add. This syntax here with the 2 brackets, I forgot what the word is for this, but this specifies a map. So in JavaScript we have maps that are essentially key value pairs. Here we have to explicitly specify, okay, this is a string that maps to a dynamic. So this doesn't guarantee us type safety, but it allows us to be more flexible with what types of data we can store. And if you want to create a document with a custom ID, so each document has a title or ID. Normally they're auto-generated, but if you want to create it with a custom ID, then you can pass it in here and use .set. Now, one thing about .set is that if the document already exists, it's going to replace it. So you have to be careful when doing this. Right? You have to really make sure that the ID you're passing in here is a new ID. Otherwise, you're going to replace existing data and you'll lose it, basically. Deleting documents, this is very simple. Right? It's just you find the ID of the document you want to delete from which collection and then delete it. Right? Simple enough. Updating documents. So this is done, again, very similarly to set, but instead of set, it updates it. So the new data you pass in here is going to change, but all the other data stays the same. So for example, we didn't pass in key, and that's because we don't need to change the key, right? We want to keep the key the same. So that's not going to get changed. Now, reading documents are a little bit trickier since they're asynchronous. I mean, so technically every other operation is, but reading is important because when we read data, we typically want to change the UI, right? We want to change the UI to display the data, right? When we're writing data, we don't really care necessarily. Asynchronous, yes. So we need to make sure the the UI displays the data correctly, and we need to know like whether we finished reading, right? We don't want to display the UI of like incomplete data or data that we haven't fully like read yet. And we want to make sure that the UI updates correctly when the data changes. So let's say you read like a list of tasks, and then later down the line, like the database has changed, and you need to read again, right? We need to know when that update occurs instead of like spamming the database, for example. There's ways of doing this. So we're going to look at reading data. So this is reading data once. We can use something called a future builder. And this will build widgets after fetching data. So this is a pretty interesting thing where, so we have like list builder that we looked at before. So these builder widgets are essentially widgets that are used to create other widgets based on whatever data. So in this case, a future builder takes in a future here. That future is kind of like a promise if you're used to JavaScript. So if we have firestore.collection tasks doc.get, so this essentially gets the document with a specified ID, but this doesn't do it automatically, right? This is an asynchronous call. So whenever you call this, it's not gonna, it's gonna take some time, right? So we need to know when it's finished. So that's done in this next step here, where we check the state of the snapshot. So we just get a snapshot of the data. And when it's done, we can return a widget to display the data, basically. Else, we can display some kind of placeholder. So you can use some kind of loading indicator or loading screen here. That's where it's done. So what if we want to track data in real time, right? We do this with the stream builder, which keeps track of its own state, and it updates accordingly with the provided stream of data. So this is kind of like the future builder, but the future builder only runs once, right? This runs continuously, basically. It updates continuously whenever the data changes. All right, so we're going to do some live coding here. Hopefully I don't mess this up. But we'll be implementing the CRUD applications into our app. So first, we need to initialize Firebase, and that's done with a future builder. So yeah, Firebase .initialize app is asynchronous, which means that we need to wait for it to finish before we can actually use anything Firebase related. Okay, so let's get to writing that. So it's done here. So we're going to add it into the My App widget. We're going to initialize Firebase. So since this is asynchronous, we're going to have to pass in a future. This is going to be of type future. Firebase.initialize app. Looks like I got to import stuff. And then next up, we're going to have to wrap this in a future builder. So we'll just do it here. Let's see, wrap with widgets. And the future builder is going to take in a future, which is the Firebase app. And instead of child, this is builder. And this is going to be a function that inevitably returns stuff. So there's a bunch of errors right now. So We need to know the context, and the snapshot here is what matters. So then we're going to look at the snapshot connection state, as we mentioned before, and make sure it's done. Connection state done, I think. And if it is done, we're going to return material app. Now it's still giving us this error here. And that's because if it's not done, we still need to return some other widget. So we can just fix that by returning an empty container. If you want to, you can write your own screen or widget to make it look nicer. But for now, we can just return a placeholder empty container. And so what this does is that it'll initialize the Firebase app, wait for it to finish, and then once it is finished, we can finally load the app. So like this. We set the future builder like this, and then load it in, display the app when the connection state is done, or else we just display an empty container. All right, pretty simple. Now we'll be writing our own class to handle the CRUD operations. This is just a good programming practice to better organize our code. So rather than making database calls directly in our code, we're just gonna have some set ways of interacting with the database, just to keep things a little neater. And don't worry about the user thing. This will be, we'll use this when we're doing authentication and stuff. So in here, we're going to have to, so I like to separate this out into different folders. So we'll just create a database folder. And we'll create a thing called Firebase Adapter. And I call it an adapter because we're adapting from essentially a task to whatever Firebase uses, right? So it lets us be compatible. So the things we wanted here are get task from user, get task from snapshot, delete, create, update. So we're not going to care about user for now. Task from snapshot. I'm taking an async snapshot. So I have to import stuff, it looks like. Okay, and then we have deleting tasks. We need to know the ID of the task we want to delete, and also create task. For this, let's just pass in a task. Looks like we have to import this. And then finally, update task. And real quick, one small change I'm going to make is inside of task right here. I'm just going to make this a string. And it's going to give us a bunch of errors. So we'll just do that here. Unique key dot to string. Let's see. So this is just to help us store things in the database. Key is not really a type in Firebase, so we'll just keep it as a string for now. Anyway, let's write this out. So we'll start with delete task because I think that's the simplest. All right, all we need to do is, before we do that, we need to do what's the thing called again? Firebase Firestore. Firebase Firestore, we'll just say Firestore, and then we'll pass it in as the constructor here. Right, okay. Now we can get to doing this. So firestore.collection tasks, and we'll just simply reference the document and delete it. Simple enough. Create task is a pretty similar story. We're going to do firestore.collection tasks doc, and we'll create a doc based on the key of the task, and then we'll set it. So we'll create a new map of things where, let's see, key is just going to be the key. So we're just passing in the parameters directly like this. Task.title and description. Description. All right, so that's pretty simple. For update, it's going to be mostly the same thing. We're going to have task here, or tasks, and then we'll specify the doc we want to update. And then string, so this is a map again. And here, we're only going to update the title and description if they have changed. Right? We don't have a need to update the key because the key is going to stay the same every time. Next, we'll look at the reading parts. This one's a little bit more complicated because there's two functions that we need to write. So in here, we're simply going to just read it, get the snapshots, and then we'll read the snapshots and give us a list out here. So collection of tasks, snapshots. I guess I should be a little more clear about this. I want to define the types of the stream. And then here, this one is, we're going to return a list. So that will be here. So we'll define the list, we're going to return list task. And what we're doing is reading the snapshot. I think we have to map it. I think there's a .map, yeah, .map function. And here, we're essentially mapping each doc to its own thing. So first, we're going to get the data from the doc. This is really weird in that we need to somehow pull the data out first. And we're just going to return a new task. The key is just data key. So this is kind of like JavaScript objects that you see a lot. Description is again, the description. And then we're going to do 2 lists. And return the list. I guess technically we could have just returned this thing. Yeah, whatever. And I'm just going to add a bunch of null checks everywhere because there is a chance that the data is null. Right? If we have nothing in our database, we don't want to break our app because of that. So we'll just do that. So that's pretty much it for this class. One more thing, we're going to create a singleton out here. You can treat it like a singleton. Just because we don't really need more than one connection to this database in our app. So we'll just have it here. New Firebase Adapter. And in here we do Firebase Firestore instance. So this is, you can think of this like a global variable in a way. Which might not be good practice, but for this it's fine because it's one instance that we can refer to everywhere. All right. So let's see, looks like I didn't add that slide for actually changing it. So now we need to actually go into each thing here and change it. So instead of set state, where we modify this, we actually don't need this at all. So I'm just going to go into here. Instead of set state, so this is the deleting one, right? So instead of set state, we're going to do Firebase dot delete task. Tasks. Same thing here for editing. The task. And also, where else? Here. So instead of add task, we're going to do Firebase create task. So that's 3 out of the 4. Now we need to actually read it. And how we do that is done here. Where we need to create a stream builder to actually be able to update the data properly. So we'll do that here. So we're going to wrap this list view builder around with a stream builder. And this is going to be a stream of query snapshots. So we need to import. For some reason, auto import's like broken for me. This is going to break, I think. Okay, so stream is going to be Firebase dot get tasks from the user. And then in the actual builder function here, we're going to need to make sure the state is done before we continue. Or actually, no, it shouldn't matter because if we have an empty database, it's fine. So we'll just say list task. I don't want to rename everything, so we'll just use tasks. I'm just going to comment out stuff. We're not going to need it. And we're going to finally use this to get tasks from Snapshot, which is going to be passed into here. So now we have everything. nothing seemed to break. I think this is good. So if I click add. No, it didn't work. Okay, let me restart. Oh, that's a yikes. Let me just restart everything. I might have forgotten something. So we're just waiting for the build to finish now. What? Okay, I guess we'll be doing some live debugging because I don't know what I'm doing apparently. So where is this happening? No Firebase app has been created. But I did it here. What? I guess I can't do it out here. All right, well, I guess I'll just implement it here instead. So static. Apologies for this. This one's worked when I was testing it, but you know how it goes. Okay, at this point, I'm very confused as to why this doesn't work. I think I might have to just move on. Yeah, if you check out the solution branch of the repo, it should work. Yeah, but I was supposed to demo the Firebase features, but unfortunately, it looks like that's not going to work. That's strange. Anyway, I guess the next step here is user authentication. Actually, wait, let me just look at what I did wrong here. Oh, you know what? I think this might need to be a stateful widget. Okay, if this doesn't work, I'm just going to move on. I apologize for this. Okay, yeah, now I don't know. It's straight up not happening. Okay, well, that's fine. Anyway, user authentication. So why do we need user authentication, right? This allows us to implement accounts and login. So why do we want to do this? So we want to have individualized data for each user, right? We only want to view our own tasks, not, we don't really care about what anyone else is doing. And also for security, right? We don't want other people to view and delete and modify our own data, right? So this is useful for keeping things separate for each user. And with Firebase, so typically you need to implement an entire user auth system. You might have done this before, you might not have, but if you haven't, this is going to be kind of difficult. You need to figure out how to store user data, including password, securely, right? If someone hacks your database, you don't want your whole password system to leak out and everyone's passwords to be compromised. And like several companies clearly don't do this because there's so many instances of this happening all the time. And you also need to manage account creation, deleting, verifying stuff, password reset, all those really complicated features. But Firebase does it all for you without us having to worry about the details. So first, we're going to have to enable the different sign-in methods. So that's done here. We're going to go into authentication and sign-in method. So for this, we're going to be doing Google authentication. So we'll just be editing this. Just enable it. All right, so now it's enabled. And you can enable other types of sign-in too. So GitHub, just basic email and password, Facebook, other integrations are there. All right, next up, the OAuth consent screen. So this is one more thing we need to do before we can begin. And we need to be adding the OAuth consent screen. And this is the information that's displayed whenever you sign into a new app. It asks for permission to use your account. So that's done in, oddly enough, the Google Cloud Console, which is really weird. So if we look in our projects, you have to pick the one that works for you, the one that you're currently using. Under APIs and services, OAuth consent screen. And this is where you have to specify. Typically, you just fill in the information here and just essentially follow the directions to get this set up. Okay, so I was going to do live coding and Google Sign-In implementation. I don't know if that's happening because this is all broken and stuff. So I'm just going to show you the solution code and just kind of talk through it. So first of all, we're going to have to add these to the pubspec YAML file and run Flutter pub get. So yeah, that's just done here. So I have Flutter sign-in button. That's just a widget that lets you display a nice looking sign-in button. That's not needed. But the two you will need are Firebase Auth and Google Sign-In. So what I was going to do here was create a sign-in UI, right? So we're going to have some UI to support sign-in. So we're going to need a sign-in screen and a logout button. I'm actually just going to switch branches here. Oh, I didn't. Okay. All right. Hopefully this works. Yeah, so I was going to create a sign in and then a logout button. We'll see if this builds. I don't know if it's going to happen. But the sign in screen is very simple before I move on. I simply had a screen with just an app bar, and then inside of it, it's just the sign in button here. Okay, I guess this is, I mean, I'll try this again. But oh, this is painful. Yeah, this is why I don't like Android. It's very, very finicky sometimes. Okay, yeah, I guess it's not happening. I don't know if I have some archived version of the app. Maybe it's this one? No. Okay. Well, anyway. So this is the actual class that I was gonna make everyone fill in. So yeah, we're gonna have three methods here: the auth state changes, Google sign in, and sign out. So auth state changes is going to keep track of the state of the authenticator. So this is done so that so whenever we open the app, right, we want to know if we've already logged in because we don't want to have the user log in, every time they go in, right? We want to just automatically do that. So this allows us to check whether that's true or not and update the UI accordingly. Google sign in obviously signs the user into Google, and sign out just signs the user out as expected. And finally, this here is the singleton I described before, where we just created out here, kind of like a global variable, just for convenience. So we have only one auth service running at any given time. So that's done here inside of services. So I created a new folder, services, auth service. So yeah, I can kind of go through what this code means. So obviously these two are very simple because the auth, Firebase Auth already has these sort of built in. Signing out, we just need to sign out and make sure to disconnect the Google sign-in. But now on the actual Google sign-in thing, we first need to get the Google user. So there's Google users and then there's Firebase users. It's a little confusing. So this is done here with Google sign-in account, Google user. We're going to wait for the sign-in to finish because this is async. Then after that, we're going to get the authentication details with Google Auth. And again, we're going to have to await this. Finally, we're going to generate the auth credentials here by passing it here in Google Auth Provider. And this is done in Firebase. This is what handles it for you. And then finally, sign into Firebase with the credential and then return the user. So that's simple enough. Lastly, I changed the Firebase Adapter to store the user ID with each task in create task. So what I mentioned before in the user object that I had before, that's in here, Firebase Adapter. So yeah. So in create task, I pass in a user, and then I added an extra field, user.uid. And then same thing over here. In get task from user, I simply added this. So you can use this to essentially search a collection for documents that match a certain property. And that's what's done here. So where user is equal to user ID, right? So .uid is the unique identifier for each user. And other than that, I didn't really change anything else here. See, I don't know why it didn't work because it worked here when I was testing it. Oh well. So yeah, at this point, I was going to do a final demo. Let's just see if this works again, just because. It's like a roll of the dice. Might just restart VS Code if this doesn't work. Yeah, trust me, this worked at some point. All right, let's try running this again. It's okay, this is a more realistic depiction of software development. I don't know what's going on here. Insufficient storage, I don't even. How is there insufficient storage? I have nothing installed here. I don't know what this is. Okay, I guess it works. All right, cool. Amazing. Okay. So this is the demo. So signing into Google, this is the sign-in screen that I created, which is really basic. If you click sign into Google, you can pick your account. I don't know why Chrome broke there. And then we could create tasks. So whenever you create a task, let me just bring in the, me just open up the Firebase console here just to show. So whenever you create a new task, it's going to update the database. So if we say, okay, new task, this finally works. As you can see here now, there's a new task in here with the specified data. And again, we could say, you can see we can edit tasks just fine as well. So if we look at this task, if we change this, it'll update the database accordingly. And if we delete it, it'll delete the entry from the database. So that's nice. If we log out and we log into a separate account, I don't know, my Chrome keeps stopping. This is really weird. But as you can see, there's a separate account with completely different tasks. All right, so I'm glad this demo works. Hopefully it was easy enough to follow along. I apologize for all the issues I had this workshop, but yeah. If you made it this far, if you were following along, congrats on building your first app. So at this point, we created a fully functioning to-do list app with user authentication and integrating into a simple database. So there's a lot we didn't cover, right? This is just a brief intro into the Flutter Firebase tech stack. If you're interested in learning more, I have some additional resources here. So the Flutter Fire docs, so this is the official Firebase SDK for Flutter. So this contains everything you'll need to know about integrating Firebase with your Flutter app. And then here's some more general documentation here for Firebase to read about the different features and how each of those can help you out. So yeah, thank you for coming to the workshop. We got like 4 people left, so that's great. Yeah, that's it for the Hack Mobile series. So thank you.